What is it that makes that coach effective? The answer is their perspective.
Hello and welcome to a new episode of the Peter O. Estévez Show. This is your host, Peter O. Estévez. And today we have none other than Chris Westfall. Chris Westfall is one of the most sought after business coaches, keynote speakers in the world. He has helped launch 6 businesses and has appeared on ABC News, NBC TV, and CNN. A regular contributor to Forbes, he has worked with thousands of leaders of Fortune 500 companies, nonprofit organizations, and high-tech startups. He regularly consults with top-tier universities and is the author of actually 7 books, and 4 of those books were written during the pandemic. Hello, Chris, and I feel like I'm falling behind. Welcome to the Peter O. Estévez Show. Great to have you.
Peter, it's so nice to be here. Thank you. It is your world, and I am glad to be a part of it. Thank you again.
You know, Chris, as you and I were talking earlier before we got into the actual recording interview, I talked about you're a business coach, and as a business coach, you create a lot of incredible content. Most of it resides in your YouTube channel, and you have used some incredible metaphors to describe leadership, to describe overcoming challenges. You use from mountains to fog to fire. Okay. And you make it in such a storytelling way that it really becomes very relatable and it really captures the message that you're trying to convey. And that's one of the few things that I learned about you. But tell us today, in today's world, post-pandemic, well, not post-pandemic because we're still in the midst of it, right? In this world, what are some of the challenges that we can overcome, or you can help us overcome as a business coach? Some mindsets that we have developed, some of the things that maybe they're not obvious to the audience, even to the leaders. What are some of the challenges that you're seeing with your clients, with the companies that you work with, that you're walking them through?
There's a real emphasis on storytelling these days. People want to be able to communicate more effectively. And a lot of folks come to me and they want to understand how to share their stories. And so a lot of my coaching work focuses on how to bring your story to life, quite frankly. And some of my clients have landed on television shows like Shark Tank and Dragon's Den in Canada. And that work really centers on helping them to bring their stories to life. So there are a few elements that I can share around storytelling that keep showing up for me. And the first is a real simple strategy, is to look for an opportunity to share these words with someone. That reminds me of a story. And the story that you share, it may be your own personal story, or it might be the story of someone else that you know of. Maybe it's a friend, or maybe it's a historical figure, but that story has a point that you were trying to make. And when you share that story, what is the point that the story really demonstrates for the person that you're speaking to? And if your own personal story and struggles illustrates a point, that can be very useful. But often what I coach my clients around is looking in the direction of stories that point to things that we all know and understand. Like you were talking about the video that you referenced, where I was talking about the mountaineers on a mountain. They were trapped in the fog. We all understand what the fog is like. We all understand about, even if you've never climbed a mountain, you understand the challenges associated with mountain climbing. And so it's a story about challenge and overcoming challenge, but it's spoken in a way that everyone can relate to it. And if you want to make your story compelling, not just informative, but compelling, right? So that it inspires action, look in the direction of the things that connect us all. And even if you're telling a story about a very specific experience, like Peter, I had the opportunity to work with the US Navy SEALs, and all of the US Navy SEALs share a single characteristic, and that is that they are all part of an elite fighting force. They're called the elite, and they have a unique set of experiences. So how do you take those unique, specific experiences and connect them to someone who's never served in the military or doesn't even really have a frame of reference for what the SEAL training is like or what the sacrifices that are required of that kind of profession are. Storytelling is about looking in the direction of connection. And that's one of the things that I love about your platform is the way that you connect with the folks that you've brought together for your conference, even this connection here, the people that you've had on your podcast. You understand the importance of connection. And if you're watching or listening to this and you want to be a better storyteller, look in the direction of connection.
Wow. Wow. And you know, so important what you just finished saying, but even beyond that, because before we used to, I think as individuals, we wanted to know everything about everything, right? So we did a lot of research. We spent a lot of time trying to prepare for a project. But today, something that has become very important, and Peter Diamandis talks about this very often. He talks about the importance of the who versus the how. Why not discovering the who that knows the hows that you need? Okay. And that is the importance of being able to create collaborations, right? To be able to partner up with people that may have that knowledge, that wisdom, that experience, that business practice that you may need in order to expand or grow your business, right? So let's talk about that. Let's talk about how today we can, you know, we see it in very small ways, and they're so subliminal that people may not even notice it, but we see collaborations between Nike and sports athletes, right? We see collaborations between, you know, influencers and brands. We realize the importance of being able to do things with other people. So how important do you see it that collaborations with smaller companies, with solopreneurs, entrepreneurs, business people, how important are those today, and how do we bridge the gap from thinking that we need to do everything by ourselves?
Collaboration is vital. Full stop right there. And one of the biggest myths in business is if it's got to be, it's up to me. If it looks like the world is on your shoulders and you have to be Atlas and you have to lift the entire world all by yourself, you're going to end up with a sore shoulder. Anything worth having, anything worth creating involves other people. And if there is a mindset block that says, well, our company's too small. So this large multi-billion-dollar organization would never entertain a conversation with us. That's where you got to stop and say, why? Why do you believe that? And by the way, I'm not saying that you're wrong, but what if that's not true? Here's something that I share with my coaching clients, and this is something that one of my coaches shared with me, and it's this. Do you have to be a world champion Olympic swimmer, an Olympic level swimmer, in order to help someone and coach someone who is swimming in a pool?
Of course not.
Of course not.
Yes.
And if you look at that a little bit more and you go, well, what? Okay, so you have to know how to swim in order to be effective there. But what is it that makes that coach effective? The answer is their perspective. Notice I didn't talk about the size of the coach or their background or their experience. It is their perspective that makes a difference. And so if there's an organization out there that's saying we're too small or we're too wrong or whatever it is that is keeping you from creating the collaboration that you need, consider that it is your perspective that gives you the ability, should you choose to use it, to create a partnership, to be of service to an organization or to another individual, just the same way as that coach on the side of the pool can serve someone who is in the water because they see things in a different way. And that different perspective is what can make a real difference.
I'm not going to keep it that easy for you, Chris. We talk about perspective, but let's talk about tools. Obviously, a business coach is probably one of the first steps that you need to take in order to begin to change that mindset, to begin to change that perspective, to be able to have a 30,000 view of your business, right? But what are some of the practical tools that a small or medium-sized business, you have coached universities, you have coached Fortune 500 companies, you have, you were very instrumental at doing work with Texas A&M. I mean, you have an incredible resume. But what about the medium-sized business that many of those are struggling here in America as a result of the economic crisis caused by the pandemic? But the reality is that a lot of those were already suffering. We're already suffering because I also believe that a true leader knows how to create, innovate, and pivot, right? But how about that that business that for whatever reason has gotten stuck in a mindset, has not been able to shift, has not been able to pivot or innovate? What are some of the very simple steps that they can take today if their mindset is, I can't afford a business coach to help me through this transition?
The first step, and you're probably going to disagree with this, but I'm going to say it anyway. The first step is to recognize that our minds are never set.
No, I don't disagree with you.
Because I'm telling you what, we've got thousands of thoughts coming every day. And if we try to set our minds, what we're missing is the chance to get some fluidity and some flow and see some options. The thing that is challenging mid-sized businesses today is the way we go about creating and reaching our goals. We set a goal and we talk about it in terms of laser focus, right? Laser focus, which is another way to say going after something with blinders on. That is a mindset. And what I suggest is that the mind is like a parachute and it only works when it is open. So what happens if we open our minds to more possibilities and we really step into what we all possess, but sometimes we forget it, and that is creativity. And I'm not talking about arts and crafts or painting a picture. I'm talking about the ability to create businesses, to create conversations like this one. We all possess the ability to create something. What is it that you are trying to create? And what is it that is your mindset that isn't allowing you to see what the possibilities are? To achieve what you've done, sir, with all due respect, you have had to entertain possibilities that others did not see or they were not willing to pursue. And that has been my story as well, and the story of my clients. What is it that you are willing to do that others won't or can't? And are you willing to take action after the thing that you want and not hold it with an iron grip, but to hold it loosely? And to say, this is what I want to achieve. I want to grow my business. I want to double my business next year. Whatever those goals are, I want to create a partnership or a collaboration with an international company. Whatever your goals might be, how can you pursue that with an intention instead of that laser focus, which narrows your focus and causes you to miss possibilities?
Well, but the reality is that we were for a long time thought to become laser focused on certain things, right? And we were also thought to be single-minded, focus on the idea that you're working on. Today, we are being thrown thousands of sound bites of information on a daily basis. But not only are we being thrown thousands of sound bites of information on a daily basis, over 50,000 per day. It's also a fact that in a week, we get more information than many of our previous generations got it in their entire lifetime, right? And we also now being fed metaverse, NFTs, cryptocurrency, and a lot of things that are completely new. And I'm very interested on your take. And you notice that I keep going to the median size of small business owners, okay? Because I think it's important that they understand the message or how to decipher this information, what areas to look into, what areas not to look into. How do we protect the amount of information that we take in and know that this is an area that we need to learn about? Okay. How do we know when we need to perhaps look for a collaborative partner that can bring us that knowledge and that wisdom? Tell me a little bit about that. How do we decipher? How do we create boundaries in that type of information?
I'm reminded of a quote as I listen to what you're saying. I'm reminded of a quote by an Israeli social scientist by the name of Harari. and he wrote a book called Homo Deus. And in it, he says that in the old days, knowledge was power. Today, power means knowing what to ignore.
Oh, I love that.
It's a good one. It's a good one, right?
Yes,
because there's too much information. So the challenge that we run into, and this goes back to the storytelling thing, Peter, is that we think that the answer is information. That information, more information is what we need. Actually, that's a misunderstanding. It's less. And information is not the answer. And when we are bombarded with information, it's easy to fall into the trap thinking that just because a train of thought shows up, just because a piece of information shows up, and there's this train of thought associated with it, that we have to ride that train. It's as simple as knowing what to ignore. And our ability to go from information to insight is what makes storytelling and communication more compelling. There are two ways to speak in any language. One is using the language of description. Description is a news report. It's a white paper, right? These are the specifications on the product. This is what the software app will do. There's another type of language that's on offer if people choose to see it, and it's the language of creation, which points towards creativity, which points towards innovation. The language of creation points towards partnerships, action, taking agreements to the next level. And when we look in that direction, our communication and our storytelling becomes much more powerful. Does that make sense?
Sure, absolutely. Let's get into life. You're quoted as saying life isn't easy, but you can make it easier. Okay, so tell me, how is it that life isn't easy, but you can make it easier? What do you mean by that quote?
Good question. I try to speak as much as I can in things that are true, that are not matters of belief or even matters of debate, like the law of gravity. It doesn't matter if you don't believe in the law of gravity. If I hold this pen out and I drop it, we both know what's going to happen.
Right.
Regardless of my personality type, regardless of where I am in the world, gravity works. So looking in that direction in terms of things that we know to be true, let me just see if I can say a few things and ask yourself, as I'm saying this stuff, is that true? Number one, life can be difficult. True.
Yeah.
Number two, easier is always available. And that might be a little harder to grasp, but think about it. Life isn't easy, right? Relationships aren't easy. Running a business is not easy. Putting on live events, not easy. But there's a way to go about all of those things that makes them easier. I'm talking about the way that you show up. I'm talking about your relationship and your ability to collaborate with others. I'm talking about the way that you see the world and your understanding of your ability to move through it with the skills and talents that you have. So easier always exists, just like peace always exists. We may not see it. We may be looking in the direction of conflict. We may find ourselves even in the middle of a lawsuit. But peace, it exists, even if we don't see it. It's like what Thomas Edison said, the famous quote, "There is a way to do it better. Find it." Easier exists. Peace exists. We don't always find it. Look, I'm saying let me be honest. Me. I don't always see it. I don't always see the peace. I don't always see the ease. But part of the reason that I wrote this book, Easier, was because I wanted to. It's really weird, Peter. I mean, this isn't the book that I set out to write. It's the book that I needed to write. And
explain that. Explain that. Tell me why you say that.
Well, a couple of things. Originally, when I started to write this book, I pitched the idea to Wiley and I said, it's going to be 100 tips and techniques to help you to conquer the future of work and make everything easier. And I sat down and I started to write that. And I was like, this is like 100 blog posts. I don't want to do that. I mean, there's value in that, but that wasn't the value that I wanted to bring into the world. And I took a little bit of my own medicine, what we were talking about before, and I said, what if I could turn this into a story? What if I could, out of the context of a story, create these ideas and convey these ideas in a new way? That would be very interesting to me. And so when I sat down to write, that's the book that came out. And it was unlike any experience that I've ever had before, because it was not this, it was, Peter, it wasn't a planning exercise. I mean, if you want to know where chapter 3 came from, the answer is chapter 2. Before that, chapter 1. And before that, a blank page. You know what I mean? A blank page. So that's why it's the book that came through me. But here's the thing also, and I've just been listening to the audiobook, because they hired an actor to read the story, and I wanted to hear how he did. And it's terrific. The audiobook is just amazing. But it's, I look back on what I created, and I was listening to it, and I was going, this is a story that I still need to hear every day. And I'll tell you why. Because I want life to be easier. I do believe that easier always exists, but I don't always see it. And this book is a reminder that it's there, just like peace, just like success, just like financial prosperity. It's out there. Is it easy to be financially prosperous? No, but there's an easier way to go about making money or conquering the world, whatever looks like success to you. There's an easier way to go about it. That's what it looks like.
And the reality is that everybody's looking for easier, right? Everybody's looking for easier. We look for immediate gratification in everything that we do. And anything worth having is you're going to have to go through challenges. I often say that it only took me 35 years to become successful overnight, right? And going right back to another one of your quotes is that hard is a habit, but it does not have to be. I want to talk about in a lot of my interviews, I like to talk about rituals, habits, solutions. Okay. What are some, in your writings of your book, Easier, what are some of the things, and we're going to get more into the book, but what are some of the things that you find that people need to do? Because I do believe that easy and hard, they're both mindsets. Just like happy or sadness, they're both mindsets. You have to choose which one you want to be. But there's also certain tools and certain resources and certain rituals that we can do inherently on a daily basis to improve how we see the world. Okay. So what are some of the things that you recommend, or that you do, that Chris does, in order to have that upbeat attitude, that positive attitude, that attitude that gets you going? Because a lot of time is that energy that fuels the other energy that gets you to the next place, to chapter 3 and chapter 4 and chapter 5, right?
It does. And when you put one foot in front of the other, you never know where the journey might take you. Here's the thing. I was watching an interview with Jerry Seinfeld, and Jerry Seinfeld was in this interview, and he said, and he was talking about writing comedy and everything. And he's a genius, of course.
Sure.
But he said, you can only write comedy in the morning. You can't write comedy at night. And, if you try to write something after dinner, it's going to be terrible. And I'm like, this is crazy, because you perform comedy after dinner at night, but you can't write it, and here's the thing, because what looks useful to me is to talk about tools, not rules. When you have a rule that says, I can't do this after, I can't write anything after dinner. Who says that is a rule? I mean, if you think about that, no disrespect to Jerry Seinfeld, but he made that up.
Yeah, that's his mindset.
Made up rule. It's his mindset.
Yeah.
But what happens if the mindset is set aside? And what happens if we look at the things that we're telling ourselves that look like rules? And what if we create some tools around it? What if if you have this block that says, I can't write after dinner? You know what I would say if I were your coach? After dinner, you need to write. 100%. Okay. You know what I mean?
Okay, sure, sure.
Listen, I had a client that came to me and she said, I can't respond quickly in an office environment. My boss has told me that when I'm in meetings that I don't speak up enough. And when I'm asked a point blank question, I feel really uncomfortable. So you know what I did? I asked her a point blank question, made her feel really uncomfortable. I said, Peter, I said, look, have you ever been in a situation where you had to react quickly, where you had to respond without even thinking and without hesitation? She says, yeah, I was snowboarding down a mountain in Colorado, and a couple of boys were playing and they walked out onto the slope. They were in my path. And so I realized I had to react quickly because I was about to smash into these two kids. And I shifted my weight and I went off a little hill and I caught this boy in the air, wrapped him up like a burrito, and we landed in the snow together. And I heard this story and I looked at her and I'm like, so are you the office schlub, or are you like Superwoman on skis? I don't understand. Here's the thing. Our personalities are not fixed. Our minds are not set. We have more capabilities than we're aware of. And when we're setting up rules that make us look like fools, we need to zoom out and see that we have capabilities inside of us. We need to see that we are more than our circumstances.
I love it.
We are more than our past. The past reminds us. It does not define us. Am I right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Chris, in your book, there's a client and there's a coach. And you said earlier that you wrote the book you needed to read. Okay. So are you the coach or are you the client there?
Yes. I'm both. I am both. It's so wild. The experiences that I share in the book are experiences from coaching others and from being coached, and things that I've seen in my professional career, and also some poetic license. But it's really interesting to go into a story like this. It's unlike any book that I've ever written before, because this book is a story. It's a dialogue. So what I had to do was I had to get real clear on who these people are. Who is the coach? Who is the client? Where are they? What are their circumstances? What are these guys trying to achieve? And then once I got clear on that, the book came out very quickly.
So tell us a little bit about the story. Tell us about the story about the coach and
Gotcha. So the client is frustrated. He's feeling the frustration that a lot of people are feeling right now, the frustration around the Great Resignation, frustration around the pandemic, the restrictions, those kinds of things. He's looking for greater personal freedom, and particularly in his job, because he's frustrated at work. He's been making all kinds of recommendations. They're going ignored. He feels completely inept. So he hires a coach to find the courage to quit his job. Little does he know that he's about to be fired in 5 days.
right.
So the conversation starts at a very different place than where it ends. And the book becomes a life after career death story. It's a bit of a horror story, actually, in terms of career, because this guy is ambushed. He is fired unexpectedly. And yet, in the middle of this absolute worst case scenario, the worst thing that he can imagine happening to his career, he finds the best way, in fact, the best ways to make things easier. And it doesn't have like some Hollywood ending. It's not like I met a coach and then my life was sunshine and peppermints and unicorns. No, that's not how life works. His life is still messy. He still has deadlines and obligations and things that he's trying to figure out. But he finds his path to entrepreneurship, and he finds an unexpected support from his wife and from his family. And together, through this journey, this collaboration, there is a discovery of possibilities, a discovery of what we're talking about here today, that there is an easier way if we choose to look in that direction. And if we say, no, life is hard and it always will be hard, as they said in Jonathan Livingston Seagull, argue for your limitations and you get to keep them.
Absolutely.
Right? And if life always looks hard, you know what? I still would say read the book and see if a change might be in your near future. That's the journey of the discovery. It is a challenge to the client's career that really challenges his identity. And he has to look at who he is outside of his career, which I think is a challenge for most of us.
Well, and I think it's a challenge we all faced during COVID, right? I think during COVID, COVID became the great disruptor. and the great pause. It gave us an opportunity to be able to reflect on what our meaning of life was, right? Many of us lost family members or friends or acquaintances. But I also, you and I are both in Texas. You're in Houston, my former adopted city. I'm in Austin, and Texas is actually the second state that has the largest number of people that literally quit their jobs and chose other career paths. A large number of them chose entrepreneurship. And your book talks a lot about how this gentleman went from seeking advice on how to be known, be validated in his job, in his corporate job, and then he ends up getting fired, and then he finds his pathway to entrepreneurship. What are some of the myths and also some of the benefits that people are facing when they leave, when they're disrupt their life the way that COVID has done it for us? But really, COVID is just another interrupter, right? There's always an interruption in our lives of a sort, okay? It's just, this is one that affected worldwide and affected in a way that our generation had not seen before. So what are some of the challenges and also some of the advantages that people are seeing when they make such a drastic change in their lives?
When circumstances create unwanted change, which is what we're describing around COVID,
Sure.
But also advances in technology, cryptocurrency, other alternatives, et cetera, alternative fuels. I mean, there's all kinds of things that represent change. Some of that change could be the loss of a loved one, or some of that change could be wild success in the stock market, for example, depending on both of those things are change. One of them is called progress when it's positive, right?
Right.
So if I understand, I mean, you're looking in the direction of maybe what might be on the other side of people leaving their careers. Is that
that's one of my questions. My other question is, what is the future of work with that? What is the future of traditional working path that many of us have been conditioned to foresee, right? The corporate job, the office environment, the C-suite, right? The corner office. I mean, what happens to all of that?
The biggest misconception about the future of work is it's determined by the past. The future doesn't come from the past. I'll tell you where the future comes from. I'm going to predict the future on this podcast with Peter O. Estévez. I will predict the future, and I know exactly where it comes from. And the future always comes from right now.
Absolutely.
And the sooner we can get right here, right now, and understand that the past reminds us it does not define us, we open up to new possibilities, the possibilities to live more fully in this moment and create the future of work. The future of work. And you had Karen Monge on here, and what a terrific interview. I'm such a big fan.
You.
She's a client, a friend, and I've known her for years. And, you know, as she says, it's not about designing the hybrid work model. The future of work, you want to know what the future of work looks like? It looks like you showing up differently and creating greater impact, greater collaboration, and being of greater service than you ever have been in the past. And if anyone listening to my voice would take that as a challenge to show up differently, to look in the direction, if you'll allow me to say it, to look in the direction of easier and serve at a deeper level, that's where you're going to create the future of work. Is it going to happen in your home office? Are you going to go back to headquarters? Are you going to go to Austin or maybe Laredo or Houston? Who knows? There's no way for us to predict that part of it. But I do know this: when you show up differently and you commit to the easiest thing in the world to commit to, are you ready? Here it is: to your identity, to being who you are, and showing up and serving in a more powerful way, you never know what the future might hold for you. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, because it goes right back to some of my teachings and some of what I believe, which is the five pillars of physical, the mental, the emotional, spiritual, and financial. And I'm a true believer. Not only am I a believer because it's something that I practice on a daily basis, is because it's something has completely shifted my life. When I tended to those 5 pillars, when I make sure that I'm physically fit, emotionally fit, okay, spiritually fit, okay, mentally fit, financially fit, then I'm able to step out of a a state of survival and stop time traveling, worrying about the past and worrying about the future. If a past that is gone, a future that may never come. And this is something that is key to our conversation. You see, the future exists when you become in the now, when you become present and available. You are able to see clarity and you are able to create the possibilities that you want for yourself. You can do that if you're operating from time travel, conscious, subconscious. You need to be present in the now, operating from a single state of consciousness that allows you to see the world for what it is and to create the possibilities that you want. And I think that's what you're telling us, right? Become present, become available, and you can see the world clarity, and then you're able to make your choices. Do you want a corporate job? Do you want to become an entrepreneur? Do you want to be a solopreneur? Do you want to go back and integrate yourself in the corporate world? Because Facebook is not going away, Google's not going away, Tesla's not going away. As a matter of fact, we are living one of the most thriving economies that we have seen in our lifetime. Okay. Mm-hmm. That has been more millionaires and trillionaires and billionaires made during this past 20 years that we had ever seen in any other generation before us. So the possibilities are available and are endless. How you tap into it is a function of how you take care of yourself to be prepared to be able to see them for yourself, right?
Very true. Very true. And I think back to times when I didn't have those pillars in place, and I wasn't able to see possibilities. But when we do take the time to invest in a little bit of self-care, and what I'm talking about really is, full disclosure, I'm very hard on myself. The guy who wrote a book called Easier is hard on himself.
Yeah,
but when we find
but that's also the reason why you wrote a book, and you wrote 4 books during the pandemic, because you're hard on yourself, and that is a function of what we need to do. Okay, if we become lax with ourselves, we become lax with everything that we do. Don't you agree?
Yes, but isn't there a way to go about life and work that's easier? Let me explain. And you've seen in the book. What if life feels like a lazy Sunday afternoon? Now, let me explain by that. But what I mean by that, a lazy Sunday afternoon. On a lazy Sunday afternoon, I'm doing exactly what I want. If I'm watching Netflix, I'm going on a hike, I'm taking a bike ride, I'm going for a workout, I'm going to make a fabulous sandwich, whatever it is, I'm doing what I do when I do it. I am in the moment. I'm not worried about Monday obligations. I am living my life fully and completely. Does that mean that I don't have goals, that there aren't things that I want? No, quite the opposite. It means that I'm going after the things that I want with a clarity of purpose and a simplicity in my life that makes things easier. And what I discovered in writing all of these books and doing all the work that I've been doing since the pandemic began was that it wasn't this rigid focus on I must create these goals and I can't write anything after 6 p.m. It was throwing that out, and what came in was possibility. That it wasn't a mindset, it was a state of mind that I stepped into. And we've all been in that low state of mind where those 5 pillars aren't, when something's not right. If
they're not in alignment.
Mm-hmm. That's right. You can't, if you can't make the rent, you got to address that. You got to get there. But when those pillars are in place, what possibilities show up? And when we experience life, almost like, this is going to sound crazy, but almost like a surfer.
No, it doesn't sound crazy. It doesn't sound crazy, because I truly believe that every single one of us has the possibilities, whether you have an 8 to 5 job, whether you are a waiter or a waitress, whether you're a server, whatever it is that you do. I think that happiness, living in that mindset or state of being is being present and available to yourself first, because you cannot serve anybody if you're not operating from a state of happiness, of joy, of fulfillment, of accomplishments. And I think the first thing we need to do as individuals is discover what is it that I want to be fulfilled by. Not what I want to fulfill, but what do I want to be fulfilled by? And when you discover that you want to be fulfilled by X, Y, Z, you said it. I feel like today, and I can see that in you. I can see that in your attitude. I can see that in your videos that you produce for YouTube. I can see that in the success you've accomplished. You're not working. You're living a lazy Sunday afternoon every single day. Okay. And that is exactly where life becomes easier. Okay. That does not mean that we don't have challenges or adversity. That means that we face our challenges in adversity with grace, hope, and strength. Completely different mindset.
Yes, and I love that.
When
Grace, hope, and strength. Grace, hope, and strength. That's so powerful what you said right there. Absolutely.
Yeah, I discovered before, what is a typical day to the average person, and I don't mean average in definitive meaning, because we're all average people, right? But what is a typical day? Our typical day is, I tell you what it was my typical day before I operated from a state of flow. You talked about the surfer. Okay, a surfer is able to get out there and enjoy the waves because he's operating from adrenaline, he's operating from serotonin, from dopamine, a complete state of flow, a natural high. Okay. And why can we not take that to our workplace every day? Why we cannot take that into our relationships every day? Why can we not take that into our partnerships? Yes, we can. Yes, we can, by tending to those 5 pillars. I remember before when I woke up in a rush. I would get dressed, jump in my car, spill my coffee, lose my keys, get a ticket, pass a red light, get home. Get to the office. I had the secretary angry at me. I had people waiting on me. I wasn't returning. My whole day got stacked with negativity. Okay. If we wake up with a clarity mindset, we're able to tend to each of those pillars. And then we go into the world and we're operating from a state of flow. We are surfing through life. We're not fighting life. We're surfing through life, in my opinion, Chris.
It looks that way to me. I know that I'm supposed to be being interviewed, but I've got a question I've got to ask you. I'm just trying to ask you a question.
Absolutely. All the questions you want. This is not my show. This is our show.
I like it. You are a collaborator, sir. You are living up to the collaboration. My question is, does work feel like play for you?
Absolutely. Every day. Every day. Sometimes I have to pinch myself. And I share my story earlier, for a broken 10-year-old little boy that migrated to the United States that was called a wetback, one of 13, 15 with mom and dad, lived in a 2-bedroom, one bath home, less than 900 square feet in San Antonio, Texas, in a corner house, and was called a wetback each and every day. Life is paradise for me today. Okay. So yes, life feels like play every single day because I'm extremely grateful. And I think that part of my success, the little success I have accomplished, has a lot to do with gratitude. Okay. Lack of remorse and not living onto my past, but using my past as an experience to catapult and move forward.
That's inspiring. That's very inspiring.
Thank you.
I mean, it's very inspiring. I think that, one of the things I want to speak into this conversation is that you and I hope I'm not out saying too much, but we're both very blessed, I would say.
Yes, absolutely.
This isn't a conversation about between two superheroes. This is a conversation about what's available. And if you can come from a family of 13 kids where people were calling you names to the level of success that you enjoy today, that is, I submit to you, that is not a superhero story. That is a story about a man who saw possibilities where others did not, a man who was willing to do what was necessary. That's what I take from what you've said. I mean, if I've said too much about your story, tell me, but that's
no. And I appreciate that. And I certainly don't see myself or consider myself a superhero. But I also acknowledge your accomplishments as well as I acknowledge my accomplishments, but I do that from an attitude of gratitude. Okay. Not from an attitude of arrogance. I am grateful that I was able to place myself in this position. And a lot of that I owe to that mother and father that had a 3rd grade and a 6th grade education collectively, but they taught me a lot of, not all social conditioning and not all mindset is bad. We just have to be able to go in there and decipher. Okay. And decipher what's good for us. Okay. And just because there's certain things that my parents did there were generational cycles and patterns of behaviors and limited beliefs. It's up to me to update my program in my computer, right? My brain. It's up to me to update that and download a new system that is going to work for me according to the world that I'm living in today. And I think a lot of times what happens with us is that we get stuck to, and we become so rigid about ideals and beliefs that we are having a hard time to detach ourselves. It happens a lot to us in business. It happened to me very early on. I found a niche, made a lot of money, and then I didn't want to bring in consultants and bankers and a team of experts that would help me take that to the next level because I was afraid to give them my secret recipe. Well, guess what happened to the secret recipe? It collapsed and it spoiled, right? Had I done what I needed to do, okay, brought in the right people, the right banker, the right, I was adopting my father's belief, don't go into debt, don't do this, don't do that, don't rock the boat, keep a low profile. Well, sometimes we have to do the complete opposite of what we believe we need to do in order to succeed. And that's what you teach each and every day, change that mindset. Okay. And it was the ideals and the resourcefulness of my parents that taught me to get out there. But then there was something else that I needed to do. There was a point that I needed to find a Chris, okay, a business coach to show me the way to say, hey, Peter, you're very resourceful, but you also do these things that are wrong. Okay. Hey, Peter, you have creative ideas, but now let's create a business plan on how to implement those ideas. Okay. Hey, Peter, maybe the way you run your organization is time for you to bring in a CEO or CFO or COO, right? So, and those were things that I was not, that many of us, especially the small and medium-sized businesses, are afraid to do. Okay. So speaking to that, tell us a little bit about your book, Easier. You made a comment to me about the relationship between the city of Austin inspiring you very much on the book. So tell me a little bit about that.
Well, as you mentioned earlier, I am based in Houston, where you used to live. And when it came time to write the book, I gave the coach an upgrade and I moved him into Austin. So the story takes place in Austin. The client happens to be from Dallas. It is a Texas story, but it is a story that reflects the world that I know and the world that I see. And that's what I hope lends an authenticity to the book, because even though it's a fable, it's a story, but it's the most authentic thing I've ever written. It's the most real thing that I've ever written. And I'll tell you why, because I gave myself the freedom in this story to take these guys and whoever else I want to introduce into the story wherever they needed to go. And when we come to the realization that we have some thinking around this statement, I'll tell you the statement in a second, and it's not true. Here's the statement: that's just the way I am. Right? Because if you had bought into that's just the way that I am, and in fact you were, what I take from your story is that you were buying into that.
Yeah.
And then you found your way out of it, and it changed with the thought. It doesn't have to be like that. And what if that's just the way I am isn't? And from a corporate standpoint, that's just
say that one more time.
Oh, did I jitter there?
I just want to emphasize that.
That's just the way I am isn't. In other words, what if that's not true? And when we expand this, that's just the way I am, right? That's just the way I'm wired. When we expand that into a corporation, it looks like this. That's the way we've always done things. And those are the most dangerous words in business.
Well, I think we saw that with Blockbusters, right? We saw that with Blockbusters, and they didn't want to update. I mean, and we saw that with Sears and many other corporate companies that had been staples of our generations, right? Companies that many of our family members were employed at, right? And we saw how they became dying dinosaurs and eventually disappears. And I think if you can take anything from this conversation, which I have thoroughly enjoyed, Chris, thank you for the opportunity. Is that life can be easier. Okay. And the heart is merely a mindset that you can shift and change at any time you want. Wouldn't you agree?
That is so true, my friend. And new results, I'll tell you what, they're never more than one thought away. And I appreciate you. Thank you for the opportunity to talk about this. And thank you for shining your light, my friend, because that's what you're doing. You're sharing your perspective and you're helping others to see things in a new way. And I'm glad to join you for this conversation anytime. I'm grateful.
Well, thank you so much, Chris. Where can we find your book and where can we find you?
Great question. You can head to my book's website, easier-book.com. You can find it on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, or wherever fine books are sold. And if you want to find out more about me, my website is westfallonline.com. And if you're curious to talk about any of the ideas that we've shared here today, on my website, there's a contact button. You can hit that. You can send me an email through my website, or you can also set up a time for us to talk and we can go further on the subjects that we've discussed here or whatever might be on your mind.
Chris is an incredible wealth of information. I truly encourage you to follow him in social media, look him up and learn more about him. But more importantly, let's support Chris and go out and get his book. In fact, get two, one for you and one for a family member. Thank you. Thank you so much. And look forward to your next interview, Chris.
Thank you, sir. It's a pleasure.